want to be better with money, but dread the math? I get it. That's why this show is not focused on math, the markets, meme stocks, or even economic predictions. It is focused on how money fits into your daily life, from having healthy money conversations to caring for an aging parent. I'm Karen Coyne, certified financial planner professional and your host of Money Without Math. Join us for conversations that are practical, sometimes philosophical, and always fresh. Learn more about me at raymondjames.com/clarity, and be sure to subscribe. Recently, we've talked about planning considerations if you're single or unmarried. We've talked about investing in a relationship if you are coupled. But today, we're talking about living solo in a coupled world. Globally, we know marriage rates are declining and the number of unmarried adults is rising. But the world that we still live in, it's largely built for couples. It's just, or has been, the default setting for so long. Our guest today is an advocate for singles with insights that span academia, business, and personal development. Dr. Peter McGraw is a behavioral economist, business school professor, and expert in judgment, emotion, and choice. He teaches at the University of Colorado Boulder, focusing on behavioral economics, marketing, and consumer behavior. He's an author, including his latest solo, Building a Remarkable Life of Your Own, podcast host, again, solo, The Single Person's Guide to a Remarkable Life. He's a TEDx speaker and all around just a very interesting standout guy. Welcome to the show, Peter.
Thanks, Karen. I'm also a lifelong bachelor, which is actually relevant to our conversation.
Highly relevant, yes. Exactly. So highly qualified to talk about the subject.
That's never stopped me before. Yes.
Well, let's just get into it because there's so much to cover here. And so we've established that you're a lifelong bachelor, which is, your entree to this field. Tell us about, professionally, with your research, what you've uncovered and, how that ties in maybe with some of these trends that we're seeing worldwide.
Yeah, certainly. So I never set out to become an advocate for singles. It started as like a little bit of a passion project, a kind of more of a how to do it well. And I felt a little bit like I'm the only one. I'm the only one who feels a little out of place in this world built for two. And I said, well, there must be some other people out there like me. Let me start sharing some of these insights. And as I started the solo project, I was blown away, completely shocked by the data, that there are lots and lots of people like me, and that this has been a relatively quick development, not, as you I mentioned, not just in America, but worldwide. So a few of the numbers. Half of adults in the United States are unmarried. Half of them are not actively seeking a relationship, whether it be casual or deeply romantic. Projections have 1 in 4 millennials as never marrying and 1 in 3 Zoomers as never marrying. People are delaying marriage also. So the average age of marriage is around 29. In 1960, it was a shocking 21. One-person households are the most common household in the United States. The nuclear family has fallen to number 3, with two adults, this sort of dink phenomenon being number 2. And as you said, you're seeing this from South Korea to Sweden and everywhere in between, to varying degrees. And so it's just like there is a global shift. It's happening. The numbers are shocking, and not many people and certainly not many industries are yet paying attention to it, at least not in the United States, as I find.
And when did you formally begin digging into this?
So I launched the podcast the last week of 2019. Okay. So I'm about 5.5 years into this project. Yes. And it's happened fast. It's really taken root in a way that I've been surprised by. Because when I launched it, I thought, am I early? I think I'm early. Like, this is not something that anyone's paying attention to. But I've realized that I was a little bit early, but there are now lots of other podcasts and lots of other books and lots of other conversations, and, you know, people like you who are like, let's sit down and talk about this with regard to my industry.
Right. Yes. Because I've long felt like financial services, the whole chassis is built on you as a unit, you with a spouse, you not even a partner, a spouse. And so kind of the first layer for me was, you know, for couples that are same sex or just coupled but not married, but, you know, maybe they have a lifelong partner. They don't really fit into some of these. It's kind of hard to kind of fit them into some of these planning tools, and you just have to create them from scratch. And so like you go looking for resources and you go looking to, you know, problem solve and find that you're doing it on your own, but you're not doing it on your own. There's other people out there that are doing it too. And like you said, I have felt that. I wondered if that was the case, that it was like suddenly and then all at once. It just seemed like there was this seismic shift that happened just recently. So I was curious about that.
Yeah, I can't exactly tell you what, you know, like these kind of movements that happened. I would love to take all the credit for it, but it certainly is not the case. I've treated it as I'm joining a movement, right?
Yeah.
A very quiet one, and one that I think will become absolutely impossible to ignore. That is going to fundamentally change the way the society works and the way businesses approach the marketplace.
And when you say that, like, what are you thinking? What are you envisioning? What do you see happening?
Well, okay, so I think the first thing we have to do is tackle the psychographic side of this, and that'll actually inform, because it's not just the demographics, right? So it's the fact that singles have much more varied goals than most couple people. So you've got, I have these sort of four types of singles. Your someday singles, the people who they're waiting hopelessly to get married, to partner up. The just mays, who could go either way. If it happens, great, but I'm not waiting around, right? I'm traveling the world. I might be buying that condo, you know, I might be getting that pet. I'm not waiting for a partner. They're the no way singles. These are the folks I've already mentioned. Like, maybe they've been there, they've done that. Maybe it's just not a fit for their stage in life, as I like to say, for now or forever. They're working on other things. They've just moved to a new city. They realize that their best life is a life that is unpartnered. And then there are the fastest, and I think the sexiest group, which is the new way singles. So these are people who are doing relationships, but they're doing it in a non-traditional way, right? So maybe they have a platonic partnership. Maybe they're doing like a friends with benefits thing. Maybe they're doing living apart together, right? So they're not fitting the very traditional, very narrow definition of a partnership that are there. And so when you have these varied goals, you end up having varied opportunities, right? So you might have greater mobility. You have an ability to control your finances 100%, right? So you can choose to take a sabbatical or semi-retire young. You can choose a non-traditional housing situation. You could become a digital nomad, right? Or you could become semi-nomadic, which is something that I personally have been considering for my own future self.
Considering, I think you already fall well into that category, Peter.
Thank you. Yes, I'm let's say I'm experimenting heavily on that with that lifestyle. And so then suddenly your needs change, right? You no longer need the big house in the suburbs with the dining room table and the guest room and the home office, right? You don't need the two cars. You know what I mean? You might not even need a car at all anymore. But yet you do still have needs, right? So you still have to earn money, save money, spend money there, but you might have a very different housing need that is not being well served by the marketplace.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think housing in particular is really interesting. Something that I've mentioned on a few of these prior episodes is, like when I think about my golden years or whatever you want to call it, that next stage in life, and whether I'm, divorced, widowed, still single, I'm coupled right now, but not married, right? But let's just say at the time I'm single, not married, widowed, whatever you have it. I can imagine that there will be these, say there's 3 or 4 of us and we have a house together.
Right.
And that's something that's not really so common today. But again, as you've said, as these things change very rapidly, I think it's already something like just this, this type of scenario I could see becoming a lot more popular and more commonplace as people find themselves maybe in one or a combination of these categories for a number of different reasons.
Yeah, and if you're a true solo like me, there's no way we're sharing a house, Karen. No offense. But what we might do is we might get a group of people and we buy a plot of land or lease a plot of land, and we build a common house with a big kitchen and everything, and then we each have our own separate little houses.
Right, a little tiny home.
You come together, you have communal meals, you have hangout time, and then you go off to your nice, quiet place of solitude.
Yeah. I mean, yes, all of those things. It just feels like the toothpaste is out of the tube and we're not going back. It's not going back to, at least anytime soon, going back to, folks getting married at 20, 21 years old and having children and being partnered up and all that by their mid-20s.
Well, 23 was when people were having their first kid, right? So this was a fast timeline. But but the housing stuff is a very good case study because housing benefits couples because you get to share expenses, right? And so but in a world built for two, those are the choices that you have, right? Mm-hmm. So, what are going to be the responses? Right, let's say smaller apartments and buildings that have more common space, for example, lower the cost per square foot of what you're living in, but then take advantage of these common areas and so on. So there are very real disadvantages to the solo life. There's over 1,000 laws and regulations that benefit married people, especially financially, in ways that are deeply unfair, right? Mm-hmm. Deeply unfair.
Right.
So for Social Security being a big one, I can't pass on my benefit to anyone, even though I pay the same amount in as a married colleague. My employer gives greater benefits to married people. So, for example, if I had a spouse, I would get an additional benefit of health insurance for that spouse, for those children.
Right.
I do the same job, but I don't get those extra benefits. I can't designate it to you.
Exactly.
Right. Or to a platonic partner.
Right.
And so there's all these sort of defaults and they're just kind of accepted.
Oh, completely. One that is really hurtful now is, the IRA, the beneficiary rule changed in recent years where, if we were married, if I passed away, you'd be able to roll over my IRA and treat it as your own.
Okay.
So you could continue to take distributions, like required minimum distributions over your lifetime, or, if you were under the age of 59 and a half, you might even just be able to do nothing and have no required distributions for a period of time. Well, now, if you are a non-spouse beneficiary, in most cases, you have to deplete that IRA in 10 years. So for folks who have a significant amount of assets in their retirement accounts, which a lot of people do, right? Because they've been maxing out. That's what they're told to do. Max. And they put all these dollars in pre-tax. And now they can't, if we're not married, there's no way to designate you. You have to be legally married to retain that benefit of treating it as your own. That's a big one.
And if you're not married, or even if you don't have a partner, I can't give that to my friend, right? Mm-hmm. I can't. Right. So I'm even more limited in that way.
Right. So the trend of, we were just talking about housing. What are some of the other ways that you see, industries or just the world that we live in changing as these trends sound like they're hard trends, like they're not reversing anytime soon?
I don't see how they're reversing. I mean, it's just because if you step back and you try to understand why this is happening, there's no indication that those causes are going to change. So for example, one of the reasons that we have more single people is we just actually have people living longer. And because there's an age gap, you just have a bunch of older women who are now widowed, right? Another one related to women, and probably the most important one, is that in America and most of the developed world now, because of educational and economic opportunities that have been given to women, there's a non-trivial number of women who no longer need a man to survive.
Right.
So we've moved away from that very gendered nuclear family dynamic. And when that happens, a non-trivial number of those women decide to not marry, that they want to do other things with their time and energy and attention and so on. Or they may want to have a partnership of some sort, but it's not going to be a traditional one. So I don't see us sort of moving back to that world anytime soon. And then what we're going to really end up seeing is, so who flinches first, right? So, and so there's kind of, you think about like these big institutions, right? Education, government, religion, and business. It's going to be business. And the reason that businesses are going to change is they're more agile than those other institutions. They're more motivated because they don't care. They're religious
agnostic.
Institutions want families. Governments want families, right? Businesses don't care. Right?
Exactly.
What they're doing is finding what is it that the customer wants, and then they're eager to give the customer what they want. And I think the evidence for this is we're seeing this in China. We're seeing this in South Korea. We're seeing this in Japan. We're seeing this in Asia more generally, where there's been a rise of singles for a variety of reasons. China, most notably, the one-child policy, right? So the one-child policy has had an unfortunate effect. Essentially, Chinese families valued boy babies more than girl babies. And so then there ended up being more boy babies as a result of that, selective abortion and some other more nefarious things happening. And so now there are tens of millions of Chinese men where there's no spouse available because there's no women of marrying age there. And so other places like South Korea, for example, has been more of a cultural shift there, where people are sort of choosing this rather than being forced into it in China. Nonetheless, these companies in these countries they're building, single seat rows in movie theaters and, little micro apartment buildings. And Alibaba has spearheaded 11/11, right? Singles Day, which is a cultural phenomenon, right? And so,
and again, that was spearheaded by a business.
That's right. Yes, that's right. Now, getting back to the topic of your podcast, what has been really shocking to me as I've started to do a deep dive into financial planning, financial advising, in part because I am in need of it. I'm trying to plan a future, and I have unique needs because I have different goals. How much the advice is rooted in that old system.
Oh, yeah.
Where is it, I think, that the sort of smart money managers, the smart financial planners, financial advisors are going to do is they're going to look at the entire financial landscape of singles, how they earn their money, how they save their money, how they spend their money, how those are different, and how they might need different services, different products, different advice, a different perspective, different models even to run the simulations, different conversations around passing on any of those benefits to whom or not at all, right? Like someone
absolutely.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And kind of like I saw you mentioned in something, taking a little bit more of a die with zero approach
Right.
of, because you have tools, the products exist where you can max out and solve for income from my lifetime first. I'm not trying to
Mm-hmm.
solve for leaving a legacy for someone else, whether it's children, nieces, nephews, charitable, whatever. Like I want to solve, if that's the situation where someone needs to solve for how do I maximize income during my lifetime, like the products exist, but in some cases, I think it's the advisors who aren't comfortable having the
I see.
conversation. Honestly, I think the products are there. It's just we as professionals, it's almost like some professionals need permission. Like, hey, you can use these tools in this way. That's what they're for, because they're so often not tapped that way. Because
I see.
you are solving for, there's a spousal beneficiary, or there is a someone you got to consider at the end of the rainbow.
Right.
So it's a very different framework. Yeah, I think that there's an evolution that needs to happen within the profession as well.
Yeah, and I don't want to call it laziness, but I'm going to call it laziness because some of this stuff is like there are rules, there are heuristics, there's perspectives. You learn them when you're young, and they generally work for most of your clients, but they
Hmm.
don't work for all of your clients, right?
Right.
So one of the things I talk to my solo community about is you do not have a hedge, right? So if you lose your job, if you become disabled,
Right.
if you get injured, you get really sick, something bad happens. It's not like there's someone else who's earning a paycheck, right? There's no someone else who you might be sharing expenses with, right? So,
Exactly.
single living is luxury living at this stage in the world. So, what does your emergency fund look like, right? So
Hmm.
most people would say 6 months. I'm like, no, no, no. You need 9 to 12 months as a single,
Hmm.
right? So even
Yeah, that's
something
good
as I
advice.
default into 6 months doesn't apply the same to the person who's totally solo.
Right. Yeah. You don't have a backup. I mean, again, like to those thousands of rights that you mentioned earlier, as a couple, you've got so many built-in defaults structurally, uh, socially, in all these different ways that you don't have as a single.
And if you want them, you either have to find someone to have a very specific style relationship, or you need to break the law, right? So I met someone recently who's single, and she's going to marry her friend,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
They're going to marry each other. They're going to have a contract, right? So in case they get divorced, and they're going to act as if they are a married couple. So
Right.
he's going to get her benefit, she's going to get his benefit. Those things, in that kind of way. And so, but that's not what obviously the IRS or the government set that out to do for two friends to marry.
Right.
But
But we
that's where
know
the
this
incentives lie.
happens. I mean, we know that exists.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's definitely not a new
I
phenomenon, but
I would say to you though, I'm not sure that the full suite of products exist. I
okay.
think that I think that you're right. Like a smart financial planner can use a Monte Carlo simulation to help me versus to help a family of four, right? I think that's very, very true. But I'm not sure until we do it, and I can't wait for someone to hire me to help them to sit down and actually come up with financial products
Mm,
that are better suited to solos, because of their risk profile being different, their goals might
sure.
be a bit different, and so on. I don't know what those look like yet, and I have to wait for my sabbatical to sit down with a blank
Yeah.
sheet of paper and start to try to map those out.
But
But
you think
like
that there's room for improvement there?
there has to be, right? I
Right.
mean, there has to be because most of the products are 30 years old.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Well,
Like,
but they also reflect our tax system, which is built for
right.
couples.
Right, right. That's right. Yes. So I don't know. Until you start to design these things with the single in mind, you don't know what the opportunities are, I think, yet.
Yeah. Very
But
interesting.
yeah.
Very interesting. Well, I'll be sure to share this episode with all the
Please do.
financial, all the managers that we work with, and who wants to team up to be a avant-garde, to be a leader.
And, fortunately that's a big, hairy problem, right? Coming up with new financial instruments and so on. But there are such low-hanging fruit for the people who listen to your podcast, Karen, right? Like some of it is just like, don't default into traditional thinking, right? Ask people, right? What are your goals? What might they look like, right? How might your retirement look different than your sister's retirement who's married with kids, right? And expecting grandkids and so on. So like I'm considering a semi-retirement, for example, with my life, so what might that look like both geographically? Might the income look like? The distributions look like? How might that change the types of investments that I'm going to be putting in, right? It all opens up when you start asking the right questions, I think.
Yes, right. Instead of just the default scripts.
Indeed.
Yeah. How did you say that? Don't default to traditional thinking?
Yes. I mean, I think that what ends up happening, right, is that I think that the average financial planner and the average client are unaware of how strong these norms are, right? Even just the expectation that eventually you'll find someone.
Oh, yes.
Right?
Oh, yes.
Eventually, even if you've had bad luck now, right?
Right.
But as I mentioned with these 4 types of singles, right? So most of the someday singles actually do find someone. They are highly motivated and they will find that person, by hook or by crook, as my mom used to say, right? And the no ways, many of them will never find those people right. Because when you're not looking, it's really hard, right? It's really hard. But imagine the just may or the new way, right? Who now has to plan. So you're a 35-year-old just may, right? Woman, single woman. Mm-hmm. Well, that's an incredibly complicated financial future because you might end up being a lifelong single. You might end up having a traditional marriage. You might have something in between. You might have kids. You might not have kids, right? So you can just imagine the intake for that person. Mm-hmm. And if you just default into the regular script, you should probably wait on buying a place, right? Wait for, right? That kind of thing. I think you're putting both yourself as a client and your clients as a financial advisor at a disadvantage without probing more deeply into what is the default thinking? What are the possibilities for this person?
That's great. Yeah, those defaults can be really problematic in a number of different ways.
What do you think is the kind of most sort of pernicious default that financial advisors have?
Well, the advisor population tends to be a little bit older and male.
What is the saying? Pale, but male, pale, and stale. Right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And I mean, there is a new crop of advisors that are younger, that are fresh and very, see things through such a different lens. Mm-hmm. But they are a tiny part of the advisor population. By and large, it is older, it is male, it's very traditional. And so, yes. If I were a client and I came to them and I said, I'm not married, well, that won't last long, Karen. Certainly.
Right. You're so lovely. Of course.
Right.
Yes.
Oh, I mean, you're hilarious. Oh, I know. Just ask me. Ask Peter. Peter knows how hilarious I am. That's the kind of the baseline conversation. And I can't tell you how many women will come to me and say, I just inherited this money, but I don't want to work with my dad's advisor or my ex-husband's advisor, whatever it is, because XYZ. And it's some variant of that.
Yes.
So that is it's just a very traditional, it's and then if you bring in, like, let's say I have a same-sex partner, and we don't want to get married, whether it's same sex, not same sex, all of those things that don't fit that traditional box, check the box next, check the box next. The thing is, and if I don't feel comfortable that you're seeing me, then I'm not going to be motivated to come to reviews, to share like really important details about my life. And then,
Yes.
so, garbage in, garbage out. If you're not participating, if you're not fully engaged, you're not getting the planning that you need. So it's very simple, but I think, like, to your point, as advisors, we need to ask better questions. And as clients, we need to have, better imaginations, better conversations. But if there's not a fit right off the bat, if there's not that chemistry, the results don't follow, because you got to feel comfortable enough to have the conversations.
100%. Maybe you could put it in the show notes, because I don't have this off the top of my head, but there's like this really shocking statistic about when the husband when the husband dies.
Oh yeah.
The wife, she like switches financial advisors like 70 or 80%. Like it's a
Correct.
very high number.
Correct. Yeah.
And that's all you need to know that her needs are not being met. And that's within the traditional framework.
Correct.
Now imagine that 35-year-old woman who's sitting there going, whoa, 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 I'm not so sure that this is going to work out. And if it doesn't work out, that's okay. I have this rich life. I have, the ability to travel the world. I have the ability to build my own financial future alone.
Yeah, right. And I'm working on it right now. I'm not waiting.
That's right.
I'm not waiting. I'm working on it, on my own. It's interesting. Yes. I've seen a number of articles recently, and also there was a hilarious viral, maybe it was a TikTok or some video. But what was kind of summing up was, kind of the flip side of what you were describing, where when we wait.
Mm-hmm.
Part of that also makes it more difficult to partner, because now we've built a life that is our own. It's very difficult to, to then partner when you've been living solo for so long by design that it's very tricky. But that's probably a whole separate podcast episode.
But I actually appreciate you bringing that up, right? Because the sort of new way singles are really aware. It's not the case that they don't want to have romance in their life, that they don't want to have a deep partnership per se, that they don't want to have sex. It's just they question whether this one, we call it the relationship escalator, right? This one type. And so in my book, I have an entire chapter I dedicate to something called relationship design, which is where the parties involved, they meet, they talk about what their desires are, their expectations, their hard yeses, their hard nos, their maybes, and they co-create a relationship, right? And so you're right. Like, I mean, at this point, the idea of me having a traditional relationship escalator partnership is just absurd. Like,
it would be so hard, right?
It would be so hard.
Difficult.
I would resent it. She would be frustrated. It just wouldn't work. But if I did meet someone that I wanted to have some sort of partnership, there's this alternative blueprint, not even a blueprint. It's a process that we can build that together. And I think that same principle applies to the conversations between clients and advisors. Right?
Yeah.
It's like you can co-create this plan by really understanding the hard yeses, the hard no's, and the maybes that exist for someone's desired future.
Yeah. Well, that's probably a good place to wrap. I think, we touched on some of the financial planning considerations, particularly with regards to, emergency savings, and maybe considering some of the other challenges that you have by not having a default safety net built in. We talked about some of the hard trends and how our future might look differently. I love just your words of encouragement to both professionals and to individuals to just not resort to default thinking and think bigger. Is there anything else that we didn't get to that you wanted to make sure to share today, Peter?
Well, I think the one approach is that there is no one type of single, right? So there are singles who are really thriving and taking advantage of the mobility, of the ability to live a simple, small footprint. But there's also singles who are struggling, right? Because the world is more challenging economically for those people. And so what ends up becoming very important is to understand what are the opportunities, right? And what are the challenges? And to what degree is the focus on the challenges or the opportunity depending on the individual? That there's not a kind of one size fits all model of singlehood in America and beyond.
Right. Right. So there are many, like you said, there are many different ways that could look. There's no one size fits all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then there's your book as a resource for how to make the most of living your life as a solo.
And
so,
I think
right?
I think it's actually a good book to give to the people in your life to understand. Because I think a lot of people who are living the traditional life, they don't really get it, because it's not the life they're living. And so for some people, they're like, Mom, Dad, read this. It explains it better than I can. In that way.
Well, great. Well, we will be sure to share that in the show notes. So, Dr. Peter McGraw, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Karen. Appreciate it.
Thanks again for listening. Please follow us on Spotify if you're not already, so you don't miss any future episodes. We'd also love for you to rate the show while you're there. Connect with us on social. Search Karen Coyne CFP on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. If you have feedback or if we can be of service in any way, please let us know. And now for the standard disclosures. Opinions expressed are those of Karen Coyne and not those of Raymond James Financial Services or Raymond James. Securities offered through Raymond James Financial Services Incorporated, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Raymond James Financial Services Advisors Incorporated. Clarity Planning is not a registered broker-dealer and is independent of Raymond James Financial Services. Karen Coyne Financial Advisors, located at 12920 Connemara Drive, Suite 202, Hagerstown, Maryland, 21742. Phone 301-739-7002.